Welcome to NovoEDTalks, a podcast for authentic, honest conversations about talent development and the people shaping it. On this show, we sit down with leaders across learning and development, mentorship, leadership development, HR, and people strategy to talk about what's really working, what's changing, and what they're learning along the way. These aren't surface-level interviews. They're candid conversations about building skills, developing leaders, supporting managers, and creating experiences that actually move organizations forward. Before we jump in, a quick word about NovoED. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoED is a people-centric talent development platform built for enterprises and training providers. Business transformation starts with people, and people perform better on NovoED. In today's fast-changing landscape, upskilling requires a new approach. NovoED makes it easy to move beyond the talent development status quo by combing social, collaborative, cohort-based learning with real-world application. The result is future-ready talent built on a platform designed to turn learning into measurable impact. Now, let's meet our guests for today's NovoEDTalks episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for talent development trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by David Posluszny, who is a global learning leader at Air Products. As a senior L&D leader with 20 plus years of experience, David is accountable for all aspects of learning and talent development, from strategy development through to delivery and effective measurement of learning inventions. He has cross-industry experience, including technology, retail, distribution, and chemicals, allowing a unique perspective of common challenges across industries, as well as industry-specific needs. Equipping people to be effective in what they do is one of his driving passions. David, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the NovoEDTalks podcast today. Welcome on.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate the welcome and the introduction.
Absolutely. Well, why don't you start by just kind of expanding upon that introduction a little bit and telling us more about yourself, your role, and the scope of learning and development you're responsible for today.
Sure. Well, I think you pretty much captured the role. And as you were reading that, as you were going through that introduction, I thought, wow, that sounds like a lot. He's really accountable for all that. We're pretty lean, like many L&D organizations are. We're a pretty lean organization, and therefore that requires sometimes dipping toes into a lot of different areas. Some things not on that list are stakeholder management, right? Ensuring that we're connected with our HR partners, our business leaders, and ensuring that what we're doing from an L&D perspective really is aligned with the organization's needs and objectives. And that's really one of our big challenges, I would say, or big opportunities as an L&D organization, is to make sure we've got that connection.
Talk to me about some of who your learners are and, what are their pressures or challenges that they're facing in the day-to-day right now?
Our primary audiences, so we focus on people leaders in the interest of strengthening our overall global leadership, and we do that through leader development programs, and then building workforce skills that equip people to be able to perform in their roles today and tomorrow, right? And having that forward-looking lens as well. From a people leader perspective, I'd say they're really faced increasingly with the need to make sound decisions. That's always been there, right? But it's making sound decisions in an ever increasing, ambiguous, and changing world. We're all kind of in that environment. And at the same time, they may also be faced with lean teams and high performance expectations. So, act fast, deliver, perform, keep your teams engaged. So part of the challenge of being a people leader in today's world. And from an individual contributor perspective, I'd really say it's being able to thrive in that same kind of environment where I may now have increased workload and I need to keep my skills fresh and sharp, especially when we talk about AI and other things that are coming at us all the time.
So many things, right? That we're all just trying to keep all these balls in the air, and how do we do it, right? Speaking of, if you picture the ideal state of learning and talent development at your organization, what does that actually look like in practice, ideally?
If I'm a learner, I have access, I have time, I have organization and leader support to identify my development needs and interests, and then the support and the resources available to consume, which help me address those needs when and how and where I want to. and that leader support, that culture of learning is very much at play. And that's something we certainly are striving for in our products.
Now, where would you say the biggest gap still exists between your ideal state and where you are at Air Products right now?
Balancing work output. What do I need to deliver? What do I need to do from an individual contributor perspective? Or a people leader perspective? What am I actually responsible for delivering? And being able to balance that reality with the time that I might really want for learning and development. I think it's one of those, nobody's ever faced with just extra time. So building that into my routines, but more importantly, having that right content available or the right learning available to me in the time that I need it, and I can get to that easily. I think that's always an ongoing challenge.
Time is probably the most universal, most common challenge that comes up when I ask these questions on this podcast. So when someone invents a way to create more of that, I think they'll have won the lottery there. How are you designing learning experiences to ensure learning actually sticks beyond just attendance or completion rates of courses?
We really strive to design learning that's interactive, that is experiential, and that experiential component is what's allowing me to learn, that I'm able to look and reflect and notice, particularly from a leader development perspective, and that I've got opportunities to practice skills and reflect on what was learned. And that's a big thing that we think is really important, is that opportunity to practice. In fact, I was just in a session a little bit ago of a pilot that we're doing, and the meat of the session really was practice. There was content, of course, and concept, but then the opportunity to incorporate those real world scenarios, and then building in manager touch points and interactions so that I've got a feedback loop. And it's not just what I'm experiencing as a learner, but it's the ecosystem of people who are around me.
Are there signals that you all look to that say, okay, these learners are really engaged, they're really applying what they're learning, or how do you look for that?
In a live session, I think it's maybe sometimes a little bit easier to do, is to really look for those aha moments, where you really see light bulbs going off, where it's people are talking about real world challenges, they're bringing in real world issues, and they're applying the concepts that we're giving them to those. And so when I see that happening, or when I hear people say things like, well, this is the most impactful program, and fortunately I have heard that, people say those things, that and it's not just a reaction, right? It's that they have applied it to something that they're actually dealing with, and it's from a very practical perspective.
That's probably some of the best feedback that you can get, right? Where that it's actually moving the needle and helping individuals in their roles. When we talk about, it comes up a lot, this topic of skills here. And we talk a lot about there being a shift from soft skills to what many are calling, power skills or more durable skills, things like judgment, discernment, decision-making, adaptability, things like that. How is your team thinking about skills development just in general, especially as AI is accelerating change right now?
That's really very front and center for us, especially in our leader development programs and beyond, right? But in fact, we recently went through an initiative over the past few months to dialogue with our senior leadership teams globally. And the whole intent of that was to engage them in identifying what they're seeing is the most important skills for us to be developing our people in. We have legacy programs. We've been running those programs for several years, and we're kind of at an inflection point. So to bring in that, leader perspective, matching it up with what we're seeing from a COE perspective, right, in our thought leadership, but having that engagement to make sure we really are focused on the most important skills.
That feedback is so vital, I think, especially right now, because even, we can say, hey, this is what we think you'll need to navigate X, Y, and Z, but those leaders that are in the field with people are like, actually, it's ABC, for example. So I think that's awesome. How do you balance kind of building different skill sets, more maybe human-based skill sets alongside technical or role-based skills?
Well, we're a technical company. We're a heavy engineering company. We build plants, we produce chemicals. So there's definitely a very important technical aspect, of course, to what people are doing. But we really strive to recognize that both are important. And one way we did that is to ensure that our leadership competency framework extends down to individual contributors, right? So it's not just at the people leader level, it's at all levels. And that those human capabilities and behaviors are interwoven with our goal setting, our development plans, our performance management processes, and that there's that full integration against the talent lifecycle, and not just like as an aside, right? So the behavior piece, how I'm doing things, is as important as what I'm doing if I'm really going to be the most effective.
Now, switching gears a little bit to talk about measuring, how are you measuring the application of learning today? So both of these skill sets, whether technical or more of the human-based skills, how are you measuring, behavior change or improvement?
What we strive for, right, and this is kind of the holy grail, I think, is when I talk to my L&D colleagues, is that what everybody's out for is to being able to demonstrate behavior change resulting from learning which impacted employees' performance and the achievement of business objectives, okay, which is very lofty and aspirational. It's what we strive for. It's an ongoing process, right? Working with our data team, making sure that we're capturing data that's available to us, whether that be employee engagement data or conducting direct people manager, like line manager interviews to see, okay, yep, these people went through leadership development. What did you see on your end? And having that, so it's not just, the effect of the response, but what happened after the fact, and be able to have data that actually backs that up.
David, switching gears to, of course, the topic that's on the tip of everyone's tongue, AI. Is AI part of your learning strategy today? And if so, where are you seeing the most value?
Absolutely, 100%. So we're doing it in conjunction with our IT organization, right? And they're really have been taking the lead a lot for those foundational core and technical skills for our usage of Microsoft Copilot, and ensuring that we've got that across the organization from a technical perspective. From a human resources perspective specifically, as part of our HR Academy, we're building out a capability model that ensures AI development and having those skills and capabilities for HR employees, and not limited to HR, but that's one initiative I'm specifically involved with, so that we're continuing to drive that forward. And we've actually had really good utilization and people and adoption of AI. So that's been really great to see.
And how are you thinking about this is a topic that comes up a lot, right? Where it's the trade-off of, especially I'm sure in a much more technical organization, where you have to think about, yes, what's helping us be more efficient, but at the same time, how are we keeping controls on quality? How are you kind of balancing that when it comes to AI at your project?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really is that things cannot go on autopilot, right? So AI is a tool, it's a powerful one, obviously, and if it's used correctly, but it still requires the insights, the experience, and the guidance of human beings. So that's really the biggest thing. We're about to implement, or actually we already have implemented an AI-powered content development tool, which is going to like leapfrog us ahead in terms of what we can do. But a human being will always be part of that process, and they're critical to it.
Speaking of, are there certain guardrails or design principles that you're using, maybe this person's role, right, is to ensure that AI just enhances human learning, not just puts it on autopilot, like you said.
So, like I said, ensuring a human's in the loop, but also considering, what are the ethical considerations, right? Especially, I'm talking about human resources. There are implications of data and information that's put into AI. We have to be really mindful of that. We do make sure people are knowledgeable about that, as well as local, global regulation and laws that are part of that, and keeping things in mind, like bias. Am I using the right data? Am I using the minimal amount of data to accomplish what I'm doing? This is all kind of forefront for me because we're developing an HR ethics course for AI specifically, right? So these are all really important topics.
That's awesome. I think that's so important right now. Like you were saying, just having HR be involved in it too, and just the ethics piece of it is so important. I have been very pleasantly surprised with how many organizations are taking that so seriously, which I think is so important as we roll out new AI tools. Thinking ahead, as you look to the next few years, David, what do you believe L&D leaders need to unlearn, and what do they need to double down on?
So what I think they need to double down on is, I mentioned this before, but connection to the business and aligning L&D initiatives with business outcomes and strategy. That's always been important. It's even more important, and I think it will only increasingly be important, that having a healthy balance with thought leadership. So we're part of the center of expertise, so we're expected to bring in outside thought leadership. But you have to balance that with where the organization is, pushing the boundaries that elevate overall maturity, but again, in this context of what's going to enable the business to be successful in achieving its objectives. And that's where we need to focus.
And is there anything that you think we need to unlearn beyond that?
I'm sure, but there wasn't anything immediate. I don't know. I guess I'm more focused on the learning piece than the unlearning piece.
David, to close, what's one lesson that you have learned as an L&D leader that you had wished you'd learned earlier in your career?
I think that's important to realize, in that while small sheets might be nice, right, learner reaction might be nice, especially when it's positive. That's great. But realization of business outcomes is what carries the day. I mean, it's just, I'm kind of repeating a theme here, but I think that's really what's key.
Now, absolutely. I love that. That's so important. And I think something to keep at the forefront of everyone's mind, right? We always have to tie it back to what our mission is here and what are we trying to do. David, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the NovoEDTalks podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode.